Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I am glad to be back with a knife that I just picked up yesterday actually. This is the Brown Knives Servo, and Brown Knives is a one-man show. His name is Craig Brown. I think he's located, I think it's in the very top right corner of Washington State, so like right on the border of Canada. I know he's up in the Pacific Northwest area, but he's a one-man show. I'm not quite sure how long he's been making knives. I think 3 or 4 years, probably. He had at least one knife before this. I think two, and I can't remember the name. That was before he was more popular. So, but this is the Servo, and since he is a one-man show, he makes one model a year of his knife. So for example, the Servo ran from just like the 2018 span, maybe a little more, give or take, and that included 172 knives. So he makes a little less than 200 knives a year. The Servo is discontinued now, it's very hard to find, which is why I was really happy that I was able to find one, because the second I saw one and I watched some reviews and whatnot, I was really drawn to it, and I thought it was a really cool design. And so there's 172 of these. This one is number 102. Currently he is making the Exponent, which is this. I'll just bring it out so you guys can stop yelling at me in your camera when you watch this video. This is a flipper knife, and the Exponent, the model he's currently on, is a front flipper, and it's, from what I understand, it's pretty small. I would estimate it's about this size, so about an inch smaller than this guy, at least in terms of this closed length. It's a small front flipper. It's very thin, very small. A lot of people say it's good EDC size, and of course it's got Craig makes an amazing action on his knives, and the Exponent is no exception from what I've heard. So, yeah, the Exponent has been running for this year, 2019, and he had recently just announced within the past, I think, week or so, that the Exponent model or production will start to slow down, and the final Exponent will be made for Blade West, which I think is in November, if I'm not sure. So, he finished up the Servo in January of this year. The Servo ended in January of 2019, and now the Exponent will end in November of 2019. And he did an Instagram poll a couple months ago about what people wanted for his next model, and the consensus was a flipper knife. So I'm really excited to see what he puts out as another flipper, because I've only owned this for a day, but man, is it awesome. It's perfect in just about every way. So, but yeah, let's get to it. So, as you can see, it comes in this nice little box, and if you are an astute observer, you will notice that this is the exact same case that the Grimsmo brothers used to ship the Norseman and the Rasks, but just the Norsemans for now. Exact same case in every way, except for it's got a little Brown Knife sticker here, whereas the Grimsmo would have their logo on it. And the other small distinction is that this foam, the Grimsmo uses black and green, and Brown uses black and red. And he also puts his logo up here in the top of the lid, which I don't remember if the Grimsmos do it. And I can't look because I sold my Norseman to get this knife. So this, like I said, the servos are discontinued, and there's only 172 of them, and people really like them, so they're really hard to find. This particular guy, 102, is totally bare bones, generic milling style, beat blast blade finish, no Timascus anything, which makes it came in at the base excuse me, base retail of $650. I bought this guy for about $850, so that's a $200 markup given its kind of lack of availability, which is totally understandable, especially for, there's only 172 of them. And so when I saw this guy go for sale, I was like, you know what, anytime I see a knife that goes up for sale that I'm even remotely think about buying, I kind of like go through my collection in my head. I'm like, man, could I sell anything? Like, would I be willing to let go anything to raise enough money? Could I get enough money if I did so? And unfortunately for me, right now, my collection, I'm very happy with where it is right now. But I have a lot of old and sentimental knives that are basically either they're cheap or they're not worth anything at all, just because of how used they are. And that makes up, I'd probably say, about half my collection. And then, well, I don't know. My dad and I share in quotes our collection because he has a handful of knives that are like legitimately his, like the Spyderco Python, our Microtech Whale Shark Stitch and Ultratech, as well as a handful of Benchmades. And so there are knives that I could, like, he would let me sell if that came to that, but they're cool and they're knives that I don't want to sell. And so that kind of category makes up the cheap / my dad's category makes up about half my knives in my collection, and then the other half are knives that I have reasonably worked hard to find and pick up and afford. So they're knives that I don't want to sell, and that would be like my Koenig and my Holt and my Shirogorovs and a handful of Spydercos and Microtechs. So when I saw this guy go for sale, I did my whole little check in my head. I was like, well, what can I do? And I was like, Norseman, exact same price, and there's almost 3,000 of them. And so in my head, I'm like, man, Norsemen are like a dime a dozen in terms of their availability. And if you browse Reddit or the Facebook groups at all, they're on sale all the time. At least one a day gets posted up for sale. And so I knew that I was like, okay, I'll just sell the Norseman, because if I ever want to buy another one, I'll have no issue. There's so many of them. So I put my Norseman up for sale. It sold very quickly because the color combo is really cool, and I was a little disappointed because I know I probably won't get it back. But I was like, man, I'm probably not going to have another chance to get a Servo or a discontinued knife like this. So that was my process getting this guy. So let's go through the case, just the contents really quick. Comes with these two things. This is the COA. You can see it's number 102. It was, is there a birthday on here? There's no birthday. Huh. Oh well. Oh, that's cool. So I'm just looking at this now for kind of the first time. You see we got the model, Servo, blades M390. The handle material is 6AL4V titanium, which is extremely common. The lock bar material, which is very cool. I didn't know it's 4.6 stainless steel. And then serial number 102, Craig Brown is the signature. The other side, it talks about the knife care and the sharpening and free lifetime sharpening, which is pretty cool. And then this guy. This guy is just an Allen wrench. If we flip over the knife here once I get this guy out, if I can't get this guy out, it's just a standard Allen wrench. I don't know the diameter, but if you look here on this knife, there's one visible screw on the show scale. There's the pivot, which is special, and I'll get to that in a second. And then there's the actual pivot screw. And as you can see, it looks unique, but when I hold this Allen wrench in my hand, you realize that it's just a kind of fancy Allen bit head, which is really cool. It's kind of unique and creative, honestly. So I'll put this stuff away, move this guy off to the side, so you can just check this guy out. The one thing that I really like about this version, or I guess this, I don't want to say model, I don't know, I guess this configuration, is not only the kind of trippy milling pattern it's got going on, but the fact that it's polished a little bit. I think that's really neat, and it gives it a little bit of pop, makes it special. He did, I don't know off the top of my head, but if I had to guess, I'd probably say a little less than 10 different milling styles on the handle. And so there's like this style, there's this style without the swirls, I believe. and there was a number of other ones, and he discontinued some styles along the way, which I think he's done with the Exponent as well. And he's done that same thing with an Exponent in terms of the number of variation of the milling handles, which is really cool. And there are a lot of knife makers out there that they make a knife and it's just the knife. There's no variation. And if you like it, cool. If not, you're stuck with one option. And so when you get guys that it seems to be especially the CNC machinists like the Grimsmos and the Holtz, where when you want to switch up the design, you just have to make the program, and then it will be able to repeat it endlessly as many times as you want. And so when you get CNC people, it seems that they definitely offer a lot more variation in their knives, which is why they're so popular. Not only are they super high quality because a machine is doing it rather than a human, but there's variation, and me especially, I really like variation. I don't want to have the same knife as somebody else, which is a very custom argument. But when you have a CNC custom or CNC mid-tech, which is a whole debate, which I've talked about in other videos, you get something special that's one of a kind for the most part. And so that's another reason why I really like this knife, and why I'm a big fan of Craig's work. But anyway, like I mentioned just a second ago, this pivot is special because if you look, it sure looks pretty similar to the handle material, right? But of course you can get makers with that make titanium hardware, and I'm sure these are titanium screws and whatnot. But when I took this knife apart when I first got it, I realized that the pivot is physically part of this show scale. And so this doesn't come off. This is part of the scale. That it's just the way it's milled, and so is the actual pivot itself. The pivot itself is part of the scale. It's milled out of one piece of titanium, or it's attached in some way, but I believe it's milled out of the titanium piece. The other thing is that this screw is actually just a pin. It's not actually a screw, and it doesn't come out, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was actually part of the handle as well. I'm not sure, though. Maybe it was just super tight and I couldn't get it out, but I just unscrewed this side and the pivot screw and then popped it off and cleaned it out. But anyway, I have never seen that before. I have not seen a knife with a pivot being just part of the show scale, and I think that's really unique. And like I said, I've never seen that before, so that's very cool. I really liked that when I was taking it apart. Moving on, we can do a quick size comparison real quick before I pop out the ruler and scale, because this knife doesn't have any kind of defined specifications on Craig's website. So pop that guy down there, and if we, for a practical size comparison, my bug out is still a little stiff, but Benchmade bug out, and then the Spyderco PM2. And so if we line these guys up end to end, Servo is a big boy. It's a big knife. The PM2 is a big knife by most people's standards, but this guy is a beast. And honestly, I mean, I've said time and time again in my videos, but I'm a fan of bigger knives. But it really doesn't feel that big in the hand. You can see by the contouring of the handle that it's extremely ergonomic. There's a little 4th digit rest, or honestly, my hands can fit perfectly within the main groove of the handle. So it's a big knife, and I'll bring out a less practical but maybe more amped comparison, where in the high end category, I don't know, I'll put it up to the end of the backspace here. But the Conigarius and the Holt Spectre, which are both full-size knives per se, and you can see that in terms of handle length, the Arius and the Servo are very similar, but in blade length, the Servo's blade is just a tad bit longer. The Spectre is smaller. A lot of people are very big fans of the Spectre size. I think it's perfect, and as you can see, it's very similar to these guys in terms of its full-sizeness, and I think, like the 3.5 inch blade seems to be that kind of magic mark. But I'll go ahead and pull out a ruler. And for the overall length, let's see, looks like we're coming in at about, I'd say 8.6 inches. Right there on the money. 7.5, yeah, probably about 8.6 or 8 and 3/8. I'm sorry, 5/8. Blade length, I'd say just shy of 4 inches, probably 3.75 inches. And handle length would be just under 5 inches with a usable grip area of about 4 1/4. So let's see if we can get a weight on this guy. It does have some interior milling. You can kind of see a little bit, but it's very minimal, and it almost mimics the kind of the random pattern of the scales. It's very minimal. It's just a series of lines, not really any really big pot. It's a good view right there. You can see you're just kind of very minimal mill marks. I'm not sure what the thought process was behind that, but I'm sure there was a reason to make it kind of scattered. Now let's see if this guy's in. I'm going to put it in pounds and ounces, and it's at 4.8. So yeah, 5 ounces is definitely the upper tier, and for the kind of the big boy category. But I'm not surprised. You can definitely feel the heft in your hand. But for me, it's more of a solid feeling, and I think that's why I like full-size knives more. It's just that kind of rock solid, there's no blade play, nothing's going on here. And the fact that it's so big, it really makes it a solid piece, and especially when it's open. When it's open, you're getting good weight distribution, and it's very nicely balanced. You can see if I put my index finger right under where it would be in my natural grip position, it's very balanced. It's the center of gravity for the knife. So, very cool. If we want to talk a little bit about what's going on here, we got the pocket clip, and it's a standard pocket clip. It looks like it's got some good depth to it, not too stiff, decent sized pocket ramp. One thing with this knife is that like I said, he does offer some like a lot of these knives came with Damascus accents, like the pocket clip and the backspacer, and even the over treble stop, which I think is really cool. So I did message him, and I was like, hey, I know Servo's discontinued, whatnot, but is there any way I could buy Damascus hardware? And he said no, which is understandable. He's not making that stuff anymore. So I might try and find a Facebook group for his stuff and see if I can't pick up some on the secondary market, but I highly doubt it, because I do think he was selling them at some point, kind of aftermarket. So maybe somebody's got a spare set rolling around, but I doubt it. And I'm happy with this guy as is. It's not going to make or break my opinion on this knife. The blade shape is a little weird, if I'm honest. I know I'm just kind of jumping around here. I'm sorry for the lack of organization, but you can see it's a bead blast finish, which is interesting, but also the grind. The grind seems to be kind of not a trademark, but just kind of a sign of his work, because the exponent has the exact same grind. Just kind of this very graceful, full flat grind as it moves up to the top of the blade, and very smooth bevel. Every time I look at this knife, I think it's a recurve. I don't know if it's like an illusion or something, or I'm just blind, but I keep seeing like just a little bit of curve right back in there. But if you look at it up close, it's not. It's a perfectly straight edge, and I believe this is a spear point, technically. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that. But this knife, when I got it from the person I bought it from, it was in perfect condition, but I always love just taking my knives apart and cleaning them, and I usually can get it working better than the person who had it before me, and I think that's definitely true in this case. And even along with the case being shared with the Grimsmos, let's see if I can do it. you can actually get this guy to double bounce on the closing. I'm not going to be able to do it because I'm talking about it, but yeah, I'm just going to keep flipping it and talking and see if I can't get it to do it. But yeah, you can get this knife to bounce out of the D10 position, just like the Norseman does, which is kind of cool, and it's very signatory of a great action. So yeah, I'm very happy with this knife. It definitely was a grail, checked off my list, and I'm very happy that I was able to get it. Oh, there you go. You heard the bounce. But yeah, beautiful knife. I know there's a couple guys out there that I see on Instagram every once in a while that will post their 5 servos or whatnot, or 3 servos. So that is a position to aspire to. But I don't know. I doubt I will ever get to the point where I own more than one of the exact same knife. I've yet to get there, and I don't think I will. So there you go. I think I got everything off the list. So thank you guys for watching. This has been the Brown Knives Servo.